Good day, physicians. Welcome to our next lesson on Research in Daily Life 1. We are done with the first two parts of Chapter 3, which are Research Design and Sampling Techniques. Now, in this lecture, I'll be discussing Research Instrumentation, which is also part of Chapter 3. This is where we choose which instrument is appropriate in conducting our research, in collecting data for our qualitative research. Now, for the session learning targets, after this video lecture, you should be able to plan your data collection technique and your analysis procedure. You should also be able to collect data using observation and interviews, whichever is appropriate to your research. And lastly, you should be able to present the written methodology or the written chapter 3 after this lecture. Now, for the research instrument, for qualitative research, remember that our goal is to obtain data from our respondents, and these data should include their life experiences, their thoughts, their points of view, their beliefs about the topic that you chose. So therefore, if those are the things that we aim to collect from them, therefore, these are the research instruments that we should be using or that we should choose from, whichever is appropriate. Okay, so we have interviews, we have observation, we have fieldwork, we have focus group discussions, and document analysis. Now, initially, we decided on having interview because of our circumstances. Now that we are still having online classes, we are still in the middle of the pandemic. Therefore, what we can actually choose from these instruments is just interview. Okay, but for the sake of discussing, for the sake of discussion, I will be also trying to address other research instruments for qualitative research. Now let's start with interview. When we say interview, it's a qualitative research technique which involves conducting intensive interviews with small number of participants so that we can explore their perspectives, their viewpoints regarding our chosen topic or regarding any particular data, idea, program, or situation related to our research topic. Now, there are three basic formats of interview. We have structured interview, we have semi-structured interview, and unstructured interview. Let us start with the first format, which is the structured interview. Okay, if you are conducting a structured interview, therefore, the questions for this interview, for this type of interview, are already prepared beforehand. That's why it's called structured. You already prepared a set of predetermined questions for your respondents. And since you are able to prepare beforehand, therefore, your respondents will be answering the same set of questions. So that is what we call structured interview. Now, what's the point of having a structured interview? The data that we can get in a structured interview will be um, direct to the point. It will be easier for you to compare and contrast their answers because your respondents answered the same set of questions. So that's one of the advantages of a structured interview. What else? Another advantage of a structured interview If it's conducted face to face, is that you are able to see, you are able to analyze also the non-verbal language of your respondents. Diba, in oral communication, you studied non-verbal communication. So it involves the gestures, facial expression, eye contact, body language, or body posture. So all of those can also be part of your data collection. It can also be part of how you will analyze the data that you will get from them, because nonverbal communication also sends a message to you as a researcher, right? So that's also one advantage of conducting a structured interview face to face. What else? Um, in a structured interview, you are also able to support it with visual materials. So, for example, if you're conducting a structured interview, you can also present them with the um, print out questions, or you can also present them with pictures or other documents for them to for them to provide their opinions on those visual materials. So that's also one advantage of a structured interview if you conduct it face to face. Okay, you are also able to gather more accurate information since you are able to see them face to face. You're able to analyze both their verbal and non-verbal communication. How about the disadvantage if you conduct structured interview face to face? Number one, it's costly, it's expensive. Why? There are times that you really have to visit your respondents in their houses, or you really have to set a meeting place for your respondents. So it would cost you, transportation, ganyan, food, maybe, right? So in that case, it's a little costly or expensive. Also, it is limited to small sample size. Remember that qualitative research, we do not necessarily have many respondents, right? Usually 5 to 8 or lesser than that yung respondents natin, kasi ang ina-achieve naman natin dito is yung quality. Even if konti lang yung respondents mo, kung yung respondents mo naman na yon, they can provide sufficient experiences, they can provide sufficient information regarding your topic, okay na yon. So that's also one disadvantage of structured interview. Number three, it's time consuming. Remember that this is interview, so we cannot avoid some respondents being carried away by the question. So there are respondents na talagang mag-share sila ng bonggang-bongga. So hahaba yung time, right? And also may mga respondents na sasagot and then magpapaligoy-ligoy sila. Hindi natin may iwasan yon. So, in that case, it becomes time-consuming. Or ikaw din, na carried away ka sa interview. So, you you have thought of follow-up questions. So, in that sense, nagiging time-consuming siya. Lastly, it is prone to bias and subjectivity. Remember that qualitative research relies on people's opinions, people's experiences, people's thoughts and beliefs. So, hindi na talaga natin may iwasan na magiging bias yung opinion na about isang respondent natin. And magiging subjective talaga yung data na makokollect natin if we use interview in a qualitative research. Now, since we are in the middle of a pandemic, this is another interview format that we can actually use, which is what we call tele-interview. Pag sinabing tele-interview, it's a type of structured interview that is conducted through video call or audio call via Zoom, via Messenger chat, or via Google Forms. So it uses internet connection. para makapag-reach out tayo sa respondents natin. Now, in this type of interview, the researcher gathers relevant information by communicating with the respondent via a video call or a telephone conversation. Okay? So, kung ayaw nyo ng may internet, gusto nyong tawagan lang sila. So, it also involves getting their contact details. And then in that sense, you conduct a tele-interview via telephone call. Pero kung if you really want it with internet connection, then you should be able to provide a video call or a meeting via Zoom or Messenger. That is also a form of tele-interview. Now, what are the advantages of tele-interview? Number one, it's more convenient. Given our circumstances, now, mas convenient talaga yung mag-conduct tayo ng tele-interview without going out, di ba? Without risking our health, ganyan. So, we conduct it online. So, that's a little more convenient. Number two, it's not necessarily time-consuming kasi pwede mo namang i-send na lang muna yung question sa kanila, let them have the time to answer it, then you can just get back to them. Or if you really want a conversational type of tele-interview via Zoom or via Messenger, okay lang din naman yun. Number three, it has a large data sample size as it can be used to gather information over a large geographical area. Yes, it could be possible, especially kaya, di ba nga kaya nga siya online. So, ibig sabihin, kahit nasa ibang region, pwede mo talagang maging respondent sila as long as you have internet connection, as long as you are able to have free time as researcher and as respondent. So, talagang you can reach out to anyone. Not necessarily in Pateros, not necessarily in Taguig or Makati, but outside NCR, di ba? They could be in Visayas or they could be in Mindanao. As long as they qualify as your respondent, then tele-interview would be really advantageous in that sense. Also, it is cost effective, so you don't need to travel, you don't need to set up a meeting place pa, as long as you have your free time as a researcher and they have their free time as a respondent. All you need to have is maybe a laptop or a gadget with internet connection. That's it. Okay. Now, what are the disadvantages of a tele-interview? Number one, it does not allow for qualitative observation. Siyempre, kung naka-video call kayo or naka-audio call lang kayo, di ba? You will not be able to observe their non-verbal language such as yung body gesture nila, yung hand gesture nila, yung eye contact nila, not really, di ba? Kasi nga, merong screen between you. So it will be really hard to get non-verbal data from your respondents. Unlike kapag face-to-face, di ba, kitang-kita mo talaga yung sincerity, honesty, truthfulness ng gestures nila sa sinasabi nila. So, that's one disadvantage of a tele-interview. Number two, it is subject to network availability and other technical parameters. So yun nga, since online siya, di ba? Hindi natin maiiwasan yung internet disruption, di ba? Yung internet connection. So kung hindi stable yung connections mo or nila, there is a possibility na choppy yung matatanggap mo. There is a possibility na hindi kompleto sentences or yung narrative nila or yung statements nila as your respondents. Number three, it is difficult for the interviewer to build rapport with an interviewee, which is really true, di ba? Kapag face-to-face, madali na sa ating mag-build up ng rapport with your respondents, di ba? Pero pag ganitong via video call lang, via Zoom lang, it will be awkward or it will be difficult for you to establish rapport to your respondents. And also, it may be difficult to read their body language in a video call. So yun nga, you will be limited to just listening to their statements. If you can observe their eye contact, that's good. Pero yun nga, kahit naka-on cam kayo, it is still subject to internet stability. So, kung hindi naman stable yung connection, hindi mo rin talaga ma-observe yung facial expression nila, yung eye contact nila. So, it will be hard for you to gather non-verbal data from your respondents. Now, what is the role of open-ended questions in constructing our interview? Remember that qualitative research relies on people's opinions, thoughts, beliefs, and experiences. And paano natin ma-extract yon sa respondents natin? In, is that by using or by employing open-ended questions. When we say open-ended questions, these are questions that do not necessarily limit our respondents to a specific set of answers. So wala tayong tamang sagot na hinahanap kapag gumamit tayo ng open-ended questions. Instead, open-ended questions allow your respondents to freely share their thoughts, beliefs, and experiences regarding your topic. So they have the freedom to express their knowledge, their thoughts, their experiences regarding the topic at hand. So for example, ito yung mga example ng open-ended questions before na laman na natin to, di ba? Usually we use WH questions as long as the question itself really gives the respondents the opportunity to express themselves in details. So for example, the use of what or why or how, pwede ring when, as long as yung construction ng when can give them the freedom to express themselves. So for example, what do you think about the new packaging? So this question allows them to freely express their thoughts about the new packaging of whatever product that you are researching on. How can we improve our services? So you're giving them the chance to express themselves freely about the ways you can improve your services. Okay, why did you choose this outfit? So you're giving them the chance to freely express their reasons for choosing such outfit. Okay, so yan yung mga possible open-ended questions that you can use. Let's proceed with unstructured interview. Sinabi natin unstructured interview, you really did not prepare any questions beforehand. So wala kang predetermined questions for your respondents. So kumbaga, yung mga tanong is already presented on the day of the interview itself. So kumbaga parang on the spot, ganun. Wala ka talagang preparation. That is what we call unstructured. Now, it's usually the least reliable kasi nga, unang-una, wala kang prepare na question. So therefore, kung ano na lang yung matanong mo dun sa respondents, yun na yun, right? But what if you are able to question respondents with different questions? So it will be harder for you to really compare and contrast their answers kasi nga, iba-iba ng tanong yung sinagot nila. Okay, kasi you did not prepare a set of questions. So it gives you a harder time to compare and contrast their answers. And at the same time, there is a possibility that you really cannot rely from their answers at all because the questions are really far too different with each other. Now, another thing about unstructured interview is that it gives you a little bit of advantage in a way that you are able to think of new questions, you are able to develop new questions for follow-up or follow-up questions based on the respondents, based on the responses or answers of your respondents. So in that sense, medyo advantageous si structured interview sa part na yon kasi nga dahil naririnig mo yung sagot nila, nakakapag-isip ka ng panibagong tanong out of sa mga sagot nila. And in that sense, it gives you chance to discuss the topic deeply and you're able to gain a little bit more understanding about the subject that you're talking about. Now let's proceed to the last format of interview, which is semi-structured interview. This type of interview is a combination of structured and unstructured. So, ibig sabihin, kapag semi-structured, nag-prepare ka na ng mga questions beforehand to be answered by your respondents. At the same time, you are able to provide follow-up questions which can serve as a way to clarify their answers, or it can serve as a way to further expand their ideas regarding your research topic or subject. Let's proceed with observation. So a while ago, we discussed interview as part of qualitative research instrument, and we learned that there are three formats of interview, such as structured interview, unstructured interview, and semi-structured interview. Now, which they think is the most appropriate to use for your own qualitative research. If I may suggest, since given our circumstances, naka-online class pa tayo, nasa gitna tayo ng pandemic, bawal lumabas ang mga 18 years old below. So, if I may suggest, you conduct a structured tele-interview. So, I will be guiding you into constructing the interview questions based on the research questions that you formulated before. And then we make it open-ended para ma-extract natin yung opinions, thoughts, and experiences sa respondents na target natin. Okay, so I suggest you use structured tele-interview. Okay, now we proceed to another research instrument, which is observation. Observation is also a qualitative research instrument. Okay, so from the word observation, you try to observe your respondent. Now, according to McKechnie 2008, it is one of the oldest and most fundamental research methods approaches. This approach involves collecting data using one's senses, especially looking and listening in a systematic and meaningful way. So, ibig sabihin, we use our sense of sight, we use our sense of hearing when we conduct or when we collect data using observation. Observation can be conducted in two ways. We have participant observation and we have non-participant observation. When we say participant observation, you as a researcher, you do not just observe your respondents, you also mingle, you also participate with your respondents in any activities that they do. Okay, so ibig sabihin, kapag sinabi natin participant observation, nag-o-observe ka at the same time nakikihalubilo ka sa mga respondents mo. Whereas non-participant observation involves only observing your participants without necessarily participating with them actively. So maybe you can just observe from a distance or without necessarily interacting with them. So that's what we call non-participant observation. Now, ano ang dapat nating observe? What are the things that we have to observe? Number one is their appearance. Ano yung suot nila, ilang taon na sila, what is their gender, physical appearance, or what are the things that may indicate membership in groups or in subpopulations or in communities? What makes them identified as members of a group or subpopulation? Another thing you can observe is the verbal behavior and interactions. Sino yung madalas makipag-usap kanino and gaano katagal? Or who is the one who initiates interaction? What are their languages or dialects that they use? How is their tone of voice? So that could also be part of your observation. Another thing that you can observe is their physical behaviors and gestures. So nonverbal ulit. How are their body language? How are their facial expressions, eye contact, hand gestures? So that could also be part of your data if you're doing observation. Another thing is the personal space. How close or how far they are when they are interacting with one another. Diba in oral communication, this is what we call proxemics. How far or how close people are when they are interacting with each other. Kasi it would also signal a specific message, diba? Kung masyadong close mag-usap yung mga respondents mo, there is a degree of intimacy or trust, di ba, sa relationship nila. Or kung gaano sila kalayo mag-usap, there is also a meaning behind it. So that could also be part of your data if you're observing. Human traffic. Pag sinabi natin human traffic, who enters and who exits in that particular communication situation. Okay? Who keeps coming back in that communication situation. So that is what we call human traffic. Okay? Sa isang particular situation that you're observing, sino yung laging nandun, sino yung labas masok dun sa interaction na yon. So that could also be part of your data if you're observing. Also, people who stand out. Okay, you cannot also you cannot forget that there are respondents that may stand out maybe because um, they are the ones other respondents keep on talking about, or they are standing out maybe because of their behavior or maybe because of their um, physical appearance. That could be possible, and that could also give you an idea of how you will interpret what you're observing. Now, how do we record whatever it is that you have observed? Kasi sa interview, pwede natin siyang i-record, right? Pwede natin i-record yung meeting via Zoom, via Messenger. Pero kapag observation, how do we record our notes? Now, this is what we call observation protocol. So we have descriptive notes and we have reflective notes. Now, pag sinabi natin descriptive notes, you list down everything that you see, you hear, everything that you see, you hear, everything that you touch or you taste or you smell kung face-to-face observation yung ginagawa mo. So, most probably in an observation protocol, meron kang record notebook. Okay, sa unang column will be the descriptive notes, meaning lilista mo lahat ng na-observe mo, whether it's what you see, what you hear, what you smell, what you taste, or what you touch. And then on the second column is what we call reflective notes. This time, how will you interpret what you observe? Okay, so that is what we call reflective notes. How do you make meaning of what you observe? Okay, so the second column is on the part of you as a researcher. Kasi na-observe mo na, di ba, yung data. Therefore, now is the time, ano kaya yung ibig sabihin ng mga na-observe mo? How will they help you um, interpret your respondents and make meaning with your research topic? So I think that will be all for this research instrumentation. We are able to touch interview and observation because those two are actually the most appropriate qualitative research instrument for us. Okay, there are still other instruments out there for qualitative research, but these two are the most common ones, and um, given our circumstances, this is something that we can actually employ in our own research.